The sky was never meant for her, but she took it anyway. Maya Daniels had spent her entire life defying gravity, not just in the cockpit, but in a world that told her she didn't belong. Black, female, pilot, a combination so rare, it made her an anomaly in an industry built for men who didn't look like her. She had flown through storms, navigated the most dangerous skies, and earned the 4 gold stripes on her uniform with relentless determination. Yet, on that fateful December morning at O'Hare International, all it took were 7 words to remind her that some barriers were never meant to be broken. "Captain Daniels, we need you to wait outside." It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about protocol. It was about power, about keeping her in her place. What they didn't realize was that Maya had never been one to wait. And in the end, they weren't grounding her. She was about to bring them crashing down. Maya Daniels had dedicated her life to the skies. As a black woman in aviation, she had overcome countless barriers to earn her captain's stripes. At 37, she had logged over 15,000 flight hours, flown across 6 continents, and served in the military as a transport pilot before transitioning to commercial aviation. When she received an offer to join Skyway Airlines, one of the nation's top carriers, as a senior captain, she saw it as a defining milestone in her career. But the excitement didn't last long. A challenge awaited her on her very first day. Arriving at the airline's headquarters in Chicago's bustling international airport, Maya strode confidently through the terminal, her uniform crisp, with 4 gleaming gold stripes on her sleeves. She had studied every procedure, memorized every approach, and was ready to prove herself. But as she stepped into the crew lounge, something shifted. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A brief, unnatural silence settled over the room. Some glanced at her and quickly looked away, while others held their stares a little too long, assessing her. She had felt this before. She was one of the few, part of the less than 1% of black women in commercial aviation. Walking into rooms where no one looked like her had become routine. But today, the tension in the air felt heavier. A deep voice broke through the quiet. "Captain Daniels?" She turned to see a tall, graying man with an unreadable expression. He extended his hand. "Richard Whitmore," he introduced himself. "I'll be your check captain." Maya shook his hand, her grip firm, unwavering. She was ready for her first test flight with Skyway Airlines. But just as she prepared to head to the pre-flight briefing, another voice cut through the moment. The door swung open, and Thomas Barrett, the executive director of flight operations, stepped in. He scanned the room, but his gaze avoided hers. "There's been a change of plans," Barrett announced, his voice measured, leaving no room for negotiation. "Captain Whitmore will be leading Flight 207 today. Captain Daniels, please wait outside while we handle the reassignment." A wave of silence swept across the room. No one spoke, but Maya could feel the weight of unspoken words. A few pilots exchanged glances. Others lowered their eyes, avoiding hers altogether. She straightened her spine, the initial shock fading into a quiet, simmering anger. She had been scheduled for this flight for weeks. There was no reasonable explanation for the sudden change. Keeping her voice calm, she asked, "May I know the reason?" Barrett barely hesitated. "We're just making some procedural adjustments," he said vaguely. "It's a matter of experience." "Experience?" Maya nearly laughed. She had over 15,000 flight hours, more than some of the younger white pilots who were given their assignments without question. She had seen this before, the invisible yet undeniable barriers. And here it was again. She could push back, demand a clearer explanation. But she knew that the most important battles weren't always won with words. Adjusting her cap, she held Barrett's gaze a second longer than necessary. "I'll wait," she said, her voice steady. Then she turned and walked out, her head held high. As Maya stood outside the briefing room, frustration simmered beneath her composed exterior. The distant hum of airport announcements barely registered as she replayed the moment in her head. She had spent years proving herself in the skies, yet here she was, sidelined on her very first day. The overhead lights cast a sterile glow on the polished floors, and every passing second felt heavier. Just as she was contemplating her next move, the door creaked open. James Chun, the first officer originally assigned to her flight, stepped out, glancing down the hallway as if someone might be listening. "This isn't right, Captain," he murmured, his voice tense. None of the other new captains went through this. I mean, I've seen questionable things before, but this is different. Maya crossed her arms. Did they give any actual reason? James hesitated, shifting his weight. They said it was standard procedure. But I've been here for 3 years, and I've never seen them pull this with anyone else. They reassigned you to Flight 422, just a short trip to Seattle. Maya frowned. Who's captaining that flight? James's expression darkened. Harold Wilson, a name she knew all too well. Wilson was Skyway's most senior captain and one of the most vocal critics of diversity efforts in the airline industry. She had never met him, but she had heard the stories. James lowered his voice even further. Watch yourself. Wilson isn't subtle about who he thinks should, or shouldn't, be flying here. Maya nodded, her resolve hardening. I've handled worse. Later that morning, Maya boarded Flight 422 and took her designated seat in the cockpit's jump seat, observing Wilson and his first officer as they went through pre-flight procedures. Wilson barely acknowledged her presence. The tension in the cockpit was thick, heavy with unspoken words. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with condescension. I don't know what kind of operation you came from, Captain Daniels, but here at Skyway, we follow procedure to the letter. No shortcuts, no improvisations. Maya met his gaze without flinching. Standardization is key to safety, Captain. Wilson grunted but said nothing more. The flight itself was smooth, until the descent into Seattle. Maya, still watching closely, noticed the error immediately. Captain, she said, her voice steady but firm. Seattle approach is on 128.35, not 124.75. The cockpit went silent. Wilson's grip on the throttle tightened. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Without a word, he checked the chart, then corrected the frequency. For the rest of the flight, he didn't address her again. Maya wasn't just fighting for a seat in the cockpit. She was starting to see a larger problem within Skyway Airlines. A problem that went beyond discrimination. A problem that could put lives at risk. She exhaled slowly, gripping the armrest. If they thought she would just sit back and accept it, they had sorely underestimated her. Maya had spent years navigating adversity, but what she was facing at Skyway Airlines felt different. It wasn't just about discrimination. It was something deeper, something systemic. And if her instincts were right, it wasn't just affecting her, it was affecting passenger safety. The realization struck her after her flight with Captain Wilson. As humiliating as it was to be sidelined, she had learned something important. There were lapses in protocol happening right under everyone's noses. The fact that Wilson, a revered senior captain, had misentered an approach frequency, and neither he nor the first officer had caught it was unsettling. And if a simple oversight like that could occur, what else was being overlooked? Determined to find out, Maya began her own investigation. She started subtly, asking ground crew and maintenance technicians about their work. Most were hesitant to talk, but one technician, Marcus Jefferson, a veteran mechanic with over 20 years in the industry, finally opened up. I've been doing this job for a long time, Marcus muttered as he inspected an engine cowling. Seen airlines cut corners before. But Skyway, they're on another level. Maya narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Marcus glanced around before lowering his voice. Management's been pushing us to speed up turnaround times. Planes used to have full inspections between flights, but now, we're only doing the bare minimum. And when something doesn't pass inspection, we're under pressure to sign off anyway. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Isn't that illegal? Marcus gave her a dry look. Of course it is. But these guys know how to bend the rules without breaking them outright. The paperwork always looks good, but if you go digging, you'll find a mess. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat in her small apartment, scouring employee reviews, news articles, and internal reports from Skyway. The deeper she dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. The airline had faced multiple complaints over the years, whistleblower reports, maintenance irregularities, and even FAA scrutiny. But somehow, every investigation had ended with a quiet settlement and a promise to do better. A sudden notification flashed on her phone. An anonymous message, "Stop asking questions. It's not worth it." Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the screen. Someone was watching. Maya doubled down on her efforts. She spoke to former employees who had left under mysterious circumstances, piecing together a pattern of intimidation and cover-ups. One ex-maintenance supervisor, Dave Mitchell, described how reports were altered before being sent to the FAA. They made sure there was just enough plausible deniability, he explained. The executives know exactly what they're doing. But her investigation hit a major roadblock when she met David Lancaster, Skyway's operations manager. A shrewd and calculating man, Lancaster was known for making problems disappear. He had personally overseen multiple internal audits, ensuring nothing incriminating ever made it outside company walls. "Maya, you're treading on dangerous ground," he told her one evening after she questioned a mechanic about a failed inspection. "You've got a good career ahead of you. Don't throw it away." "I'm just doing my job," she replied evenly. "No," he corrected, his smile razor-sharp. "You're making yourself a liability." That night, Maya's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her files were scattered across the floor, her laptop screen cracked. A warning. The next morning, she met James before their scheduled flight. "James," she said quietly, "I think Skyway is covering up safety violations." James hesitated but didn't look surprised. "I've heard rumors," he admitted. "But no one wants to talk. They're scared." Maya exhaled. "What about you?" He looked around before nodding. "If you find something solid, I'll back you up." Encouraged, Maya took her investigation further. During a routine pre-flight check, she requested access to the maintenance logs of their aircraft. What she found made her stomach drop. Inconsistencies in repair dates, missing signatures, and suspiciously vague reports on past technical issues. Then, an emergency struck. A Skyway flight bound for New York suffered rapid decompression midair, forcing an emergency landing. The cause? A cracked cabin pressure valve, one that should have been grounded weeks ago. Maya's breath caught as she realized this was the same issue Lauren Kim had warned her about. But instead of investigating, Skyway blamed pilot error. The stakes had just skyrocketed. She confronted James later that night. "James, you said you'd back me up. This is it. We can't ignore this." James sighed, avoiding her gaze. "You don't understand. They know." Maya frowned. "Know what?" James looked up, guilt in his eyes. "They know everything, Maya. Lancaster. He knew you were investigating before you even started." A sick feeling settled in her gut. "You told them?" "I didn't have a choice," James whispered. "They threatened my family." Maya took a step back, the betrayal hitting her hard. James had been feeding them information the whole time. And now, she was completely alone. Later that night, she received another message. "You should have walked away when you had the chance." The next morning, she was called into a meeting with Thomas Barrett, Richard Whitmore, and David Lancaster. Barrett's tone was clipped. "Captain Daniels, we've received reports that you've been interfering with company operations." Maya met his gaze. "I've been ensuring safety regulations are followed. You delayed flights. You overstepped your role," Barrett said coldly. "This is a formal warning." David Lancaster leaned forward, his voice smooth. "We know about your little investigation, but you don't have enough. Walk away, and we'll forget this happened." Maya didn't blink. "Are you saying I should ignore maintenance discrepancies?" Richard Whitmore cut in. "We are saying that pilots should trust our established procedures." Maya let out a breath. "Then put that in writing." Silence. Barrett's jaw tightened. "You're on administrative review, effective immediately." Maya had expected this. They were trying to silence her. But she wasn't done yet. Before she left, she dropped her final bombshell. "I've already reported everything to the FAA and to a journalist at the Chicago Tribune." The room went deadly silent. Then, her phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "Now you've made a real mistake." Maya knew she had crossed a point of no return. The moment she uttered the words, "I've already reported everything to the FAA," she had sealed her fate with Skyway Airlines. But she wasn't afraid. If anything, she felt a strange sense of calm. She had fought too hard, come too far, to back down now. After the tense confrontation with the executives, she was officially placed on administrative leave, her access to Skyway's internal systems revoked. They were trying to shut her out, but she had already done what needed to be done. The FAA launched an immediate investigation, sending inspectors to Skyway's maintenance facilities, reviewing flight logs, and interviewing employees. Within days, reports surfaced that over 30% of Skyway's fleet had outstanding maintenance violations. The airline scrambled to do damage control, issuing vague statements about enhanced safety reviews while quietly grounding several planes. But the truth was already spreading. As expected, Maya became a target. Whispers spread through the industry. Some pilots saw her as a hero, others as a troublemaker who had jeopardized their jobs. Even those who had silently supported her before were now hesitant to be seen with her. Then, the threat started. One evening, as Maya walked home from a late meeting with her lawyer, she noticed a black sedan parked near her apartment. It had been there the night before. When she turned a corner, the car's headlights flickered on, following her for half a block before speeding away. A warning. Her heart pounded as she reached her building. She hesitated before stepping inside, scanning the street behind her. Was she imagining it? Or had a figure just disappeared into the shadows? A chill ran down her spine. For the first time, doubt crept in. Was this fight worth her life? The next morning, her phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "You're playing a dangerous game, Captain. Back off." Maya exhaled, gripping her phone tightly. A flicker of fear stirred inside her, but she quickly smothered it. This was the price of truth. She thought of the passengers boarding Skyway flights, trusting that safety procedures were being followed. That was why she couldn't back down. James texted her the day after the FAA announcement. "James, they're saying you exaggerated everything. Management's pushing back hard. They've got PR firms smearing you all over the news. And there's something else. Maya, the FAA findings speak for themselves." "What is it?" "James, they've got evidence against you. Someone leaked a report claiming you falsified your flight records at your last airline." Maya froze. "What?" Her fingers hovered over her phone before she quickly searched the latest news. There it was, an article claiming an unnamed source had proof that Maya had exaggerated her credentials and had been under investigation for misconduct years ago. It was completely false, but it had already gone viral. Skyway was playing dirty. Lauren Kim called minutes later. "Maya, they're trying to discredit you. They have pilots on TV saying you've always had a chip on your shoulder. They're even saying you have a personal grudge against the CEO." Maya's stomach churned. The public was turning against her. Her inbox flooded with messages, some supportive, but many calling her a fraud. She took a shaky breath. This was expected. This was part of the game. Then, a package arrived. A plain brown box with no return address, left outside her door. Inside was a small piece of metal, scorched and twisted. A note was tucked beneath it. "Do you really want to know where this came from?" Maya's breath hitched. She recognized it immediately, a fragment from an aircraft fuselage. Someone was telling her to stop digging. She didn't sleep that night. The pressure on Skyway intensified. FAA regulators expanded their probe, uncovering years of falsified maintenance reports. Former employees came forward, including mechanics and flight attendants, confirming Maya's claims. The airline stock plummeted as passengers canceled bookings, unwilling to trust a company embroiled in scandal. But the most damning blow came when Marcus Jefferson, the veteran maintenance technician, reached out again. "We can't talk over the phone," he said. "Meet me in person." They arranged a late-night meeting in a dimly lit parking garage. Maya arrived early, parking near an exit. The air felt thick, every small noise amplified. As she waited, she glanced at a nearby security camera, wondering if someone inside Skyway was already tracking her movements. Minutes passed, then 10, then 15. A bead of sweat formed at her temple. Something was wrong. Just as she was about to leave, footsteps echoed. Marcus appeared, looking over his shoulder. He wasn't alone. Another mechanic, a nervous-looking man, stood beside him. Marcus handed her a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Emails, maintenance logs, internal memos." They knew, and they let people fly anyway. Maya felt the weight of it in her palm. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus swallowed hard. "They threatened my wife. If they find out I gave this to you." He didn't finish the sentence. Maya placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "I won't let them bury this." Marcus hesitated. "You're braver than me." Maya met his gaze. "No, I'm just too stubborn to stop." The fallout was swift. Within 2 weeks, Skyway Airlines was forced to ground nearly 50% of its fleet. The CEO resigned, followed by several senior executives. The Department of Justice announced a criminal investigation into Skyway's leadership. Then came the final blow. The FAA revoked Skyway's operating license, effectively shutting down the airline. What had once been a leading carrier was now a cautionary tale in corporate negligence and whistleblower retaliation. 3 months later, Maya sat in a small cafe across from the now empty Skyway headquarters. Workers were removing the airline's logo from the building, leaving only faint outlines where the letters had once been. James slid into the seat across from her, setting down 2 coffees. "You see the news?" Maya nodded. "Atlantic Airways is buying up Skyway's assets." James smirked. "And offering jobs to most of the pilots and crew. Except the ones under federal investigation, of course." "And you?" Maya asked. "Senior first officer," he confirmed with a grin. "I start next month." Maya sipped her coffee. "Good for you." James tilted his head. "What about you?" Maya had received multiple job offers, other airlines, aviation safety organizations, even a book deal. But one offer stood out. "The FAA wants me to join their Aviation Safety Oversight Committee," she admitted. "Help reform industry policies." James whistled. "So, not just a pilot anymore. A policymaker." Maya smiled. "Maybe it's time to make sure this never happens again." As she looked out at the skyline, she realized something. This fight had been bigger than her. It had been about every passenger who put their trust in a plane, about every employee too afraid to speak up, about proving that safety should never be sacrificed for profit. Maya Daniels had taken on an airline and won. But this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, because now she had the power to change everything. 3 months had passed since Skyway's collapse, but the ripples of Maya's fight were still spreading through the aviation industry. Airlines were scrambling to audit their own safety procedures, terrified they might be next. The FAA had rolled out a sweeping reform plan, tightening oversight on maintenance records and whistleblower protections. Maya had spent the last few months adjusting to her new reality, no longer just a pilot, but a symbol of industry accountability. But not everyone saw her that way. While some called her a hero, others, especially those who had benefited from the old system, saw her as a troublemaker who had ruined careers. Maya received anonymous hate mail, accusing her of seeking fame. She ignored most of it, but one letter caught her eye. "You think it's over? It's just beginning. People like you don't get to walk away clean." A chill ran down her spine as she scanned the room. The words felt different, calculated. Threats no longer surprised her, but something about this one sent a shiver through her. She wasn't just being warned. She was being watched. That night, as she locked up her apartment, she noticed something strange. Her desk drawers were slightly open, though she was certain she had closed them that morning. Nothing was missing, but someone had been here. A message, without words. One morning, as she prepared for a meeting with the FAA, an email from an unknown sender appeared in her inbox. Subject: "I was wrong." Maya hesitated before opening it. Her breath caught as she read the sender's name, Richard Whitmore. "Captain Daniels, you were right about Skyway, but you didn't know everything. There were things we covered up, things far worse than you imagined. I can't say more, but if you keep pushing, you'll find it. I know that now. For whatever it's worth, after all this time, I am sorry." Maya sat back, emotions conflicting within her. What else had Skyway hidden? The thought sent a pulse of unease through her. Had she truly exposed everything? Or had she only scratched the surface? After a long pause, she typed a simple response. "Apology accepted. The sky belongs to all of us." But as she hit send, she knew this wasn't over. Maya's new role on the FAA's Aviation Safety Oversight Committee kept her busy, but she still missed flying. One day, after wrapping up a policy review session, she found herself driving to O'Hare International Airport. She parked in the observation lot, stepping out as a jumbo jet roared overhead, its landing gear unfolding as it touched down. She closed her eyes and inhaled. The scent of jet fuel, the distant hum of engines. It was like muscle memory, pulling her back. This was home. Her phone buzzed. "Captain Daniels, we'd like to offer you a position as senior captain. You'd also help lead our new whistleblower protection initiative." Maya smiled. "I'll need some time to think about it." After hanging up, she glanced at the framed quote on her desk, the one taken from her testimony before Congress. In aviation, the truth isn't just a virtue. It's a necessity. The sky forgives many things, but it never forgives lies. She traced the words with her fingers, a memory flashing in her mind. The night she had been forced to decide. The moment she realized she could stay silent, let things go, walk away with her career intact. But she hadn't, and she never would. Maya picked up her phone and dialed Atlantic Airways. "I didn't come this far just to stop now. Let's fly." As she stepped outside, A plane climbed into the vast sky, disappearing into the clouds. The sky was limitless, and so was she. Weeks into her new role at Atlantic Airways, Maya found herself in a different kind of turbulence. Though the airline had promised a fresh start, old industry habits were hard to break. She had already encountered pushback from senior executives who viewed her whistleblower stance as a threat rather than an asset. One afternoon, as she settled into her office, a manila envelope arrived. No return address. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, like a bomb waiting to detonate in her hands. She hesitated before peeling back the flap, her fingers running over the rough paper. Inside were copies of internal documents, some stamped confidential with FAA markings, and a handwritten note on top. You were right about Skyway, but they weren't the only ones. A cold knot twisted in her stomach. The scent of ink and aged paper filled the air as she flipped through the pages. Maintenance violations, cover-ups spanning multiple airlines, and evidence of FAA officials turning a blind eye. It was bigger than she had imagined. Far bigger. She stopped at one particular page, her pulse quickening as her eyes locked onto a name. A name she knew. A sharp knock at her door pulled her out of her thoughts. James stepped in, his expression unreadable. "You need to see this," he said, holding up his tablet. On the screen, a breaking news headline scrolled across the bottom. Whistleblower's former airline under new investigation. Maya Daniels at the center again. Her stomach dropped. The article wasn't just reporting new findings. It was framing her as the problem. Speculations swirled about her involvement in another potential scandal, this time targeting Atlantic Airways. "They're setting you up," James murmured. Same playbook as before. Maya clenched her jaw, her heart pounding against her ribs. Fear threatened to creep in, but she shoved it aside. Last time, she had been caught off guard. Not this time. She looked back at the documents, at the undeniable proof in her hands. If she exposed this, she wouldn't just be taking on one airline. She'd be going after the entire system. A notification flashed on her phone. Another email. No sender. No subject. Just a cold, calculated message. "You don't know what you're stepping into. Walk away." Her breath hitched, a chill creeping down her spine. Walk away? She could. She could take her new job, fly her routes, and pretend she never saw this. Let someone else fight this fight. She sat back, staring at the document with the familiar name. Could she trust anyone anymore? For a moment, she let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the weight of always fighting. She thought about her sister, about the life she had once imagined for herself. A quiet life, free from battles like these. But then she thought about the passengers. The ones who had boarded Skyway flights without knowing the risk. The ones who had trusted pilots like her to protect them. The ones who had written to her, thanking her for saving their lives without even knowing it. She inhaled sharply, exhaling the doubt. Maya Daniels wasn't the kind of person who walked away. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. Then, a thought struck her. If they were trying this hard to silence her, then she was closer to the truth than she had ever been. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she had hoped she'd never need again. "It's me," she said when the line connected. "I need your help, and I need to know just how deep this goes." Outside her window, a plane soared into the sky, disappearing beyond the horizon. Maya watched it for a moment before turning back to her desk. Maya didn't sleep that night. The documents in the manila envelope were spread across her coffee table like pieces of a puzzle she wished she didn't have to solve. The name that had stopped her cold earlier that day stared back at her. A person she had once trusted, someone she had believed was on her side. Her phone buzzed. "James. James. Maya, I've been digging. The corruption goes higher than we thought. We need to meet. It's not safe over the phone." Maya's pulse quickened. She glanced toward her window, the city lights casting long shadows across her apartment. Not safe over the phone. That phrase echoed in her mind. She grabbed her keys and left. The parking garage was nearly empty when she arrived. The dim overhead lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the concrete. The stale scent of gasoline and damp concrete filled the air. Maya parked near the exit, keeping her car running, an instinct she had learned to trust. Every noise felt amplified, every shadow deeper. James was already there, pacing. He looked up when she approached, holding up a flash drive. "This is bigger than Skyway, bigger than Atlantic. The FAA isn't just ignoring this, they're part of it." Maya's stomach churned. "How do you know?" James hesitated before answering. Because someone inside the FAA just tried to pay me off to back away. The words hit her like turbulence at 30,000 feet. What? He handed her the flash drive. There are emails, financial records, everything. Pilots have reported maintenance failures, and instead of grounding the planes, the FAA approved them. Airlines are paying for priority approvals. Some of these planes were disasters waiting to happen. Maya's grip tightened around the small device. The weight of what she was about to do pressed against her like an invisible force. If she exposed this, she wasn't just going after corrupt executives anymore. She was going after an entire system. You're hesitating, James noted. She exhaled slowly. I'm thinking. If we go public with this, he said, lowering his voice, they will come for us. Maya knew he was right. This wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about survival. Who else had already tried and disappeared? A distant sound echoed through the garage, a door slamming. Maya's senses sharpened. She turned slightly, catching movement near the stairwell. Not just a shadow. Someone was there. Watching. We need to go? Now. James nodded, already moving. They reached their cars, but as Maya slid into the driver's seat, she saw it. A black SUV idling a few spaces away, its engine revving. The headlights flashed on, and then it lurched forward. Adrenaline shot through her veins. She threw the car into reverse, tires screeching against the concrete as she sped toward the exit. In her mirror, she saw James doing the same, swerving as the SUV accelerated after them. The ramp was just ahead. If she could make it to the main road. The SUV cut across the lane, blocking James's path. Maya's pulse pounded in her ears. They weren't just being watched anymore. They were being hunted. She slammed on the gas, weaving past a row of parked cars, heart hammering against her ribs. James managed to slip through an opening, his tires screeching onto the street as Maya followed. The SUV hesitated for a moment, then turned in the opposite direction. They were safe, for now. Back at her apartment, she locked the door behind her, her mind racing. The flash drive sat on the counter, a ticking time bomb waiting to be unleashed. If she exposed this, there would be no turning back. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping at one name. Zoe, her sister, the one person who had always warned her about this fight. Maya's fingers hovered over the call button. She imagined Zoe's voice, telling her to be careful, to think this through. But how could she, when lives were at stake? Instead, she typed a message. Maya, if something happens to me, I need you to know I did the right thing. Zoe responded almost instantly. Zoe, Maya, what's going on? What do you mean if something happens? Call me. Maya stared at the screen for a long moment. She wanted to call, wanted to hear her sister's voice, wanted to be anywhere but here, in this fight, with this decision hanging over her. But there was no escaping this. She had made her choice the moment she stepped into that cockpit all those years ago. She opened her email and began typing. 2. Investigative Division, The New York Times. Subject, Aviation Corruption, Urgent. She attached the documents and the files from the flash drive. Her hands trembled as she hovered over the send button. Once she did this, there was no undoing it. A deep breath. A final decision. She clicked send. Somewhere, the first crack in the system had just formed. And soon, the whole thing would come crashing down. Maya exhaled and looked out the window. The sky had no doors, no limits, only open air. And she was ready to fly straight through it. The morning after Maya sent the email, the world felt eerily unchanged. The sun rose, the city hummed with life, and flights departed from O'Hare as if nothing had happened. But Maya knew better. The first ripple had already started. She just didn't know how far it would reach. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello. A measured voice spoke. Captain Daniels. This is Nora Patel from the New York Times. You have no idea what you've just started. Maya tightened her grip on the phone. Then help me finish it. Nora exhaled. We're running the story. We've already verified some of the documents. We need you on record. Maya glanced at the window, the paranoia creeping back in. Going public meant full exposure. No more hiding. But she had come too far to back down now. Set it up, she said. I'll talk. By midday, the first article broke. The headline hit like a thunderclap. Whistleblower exposes FAA's role in airline safety cover-up, government and major airlines under scrutiny. Maya barely had time to react before her inbox flooded. News stations were calling. Former employees at Skyway and other airlines were reaching out, some offering support, others warning her to be careful. Then the second wave hit. Denials. Counterattacks. The FAA released a statement dismissing the claims, calling her allegations baseless and irresponsible. Airlines rushed to distance themselves, framing her as a disgruntled former employee looking for attention. A talking head on a news network accused her of sabotaging the airline industry out of personal vendetta. Maya watched the coverage in silence, her stomach tightening. They were trying to turn her into the villain. Her phone vibrated. Zoe. Maya hesitated, then picked up. I know what you're going to say. No, you don't, Zoe said sharply. Because I just got a call from a blocked number. A man told me to convince my sister to drop this before she gets herself hurt. Maya's breath caught. Zoe, are you okay? I'm fine. But Maya, this isn't just threats anymore. They know where I live. Maya's hands clenched into fists. They weren't just coming for her now. They were coming for her family. Her laptop chimed, an incoming video call. The number was unfamiliar, but something told her she needed to answer it. She took a steadying breath and clicked accept. A man appeared on the screen, mid-50s, sharp suit, cold eyes. Maya recognized him instantly. David Carter, Deputy Director at the FAA. I assume you've seen the news, he said smoothly. Maya leaned back. I assume you're here to threaten me. His smile didn't reach his eyes. No, Captain Daniels. I'm here to offer you a choice. She didn't speak. She let him continue. The aviation industry is built on trust, Carter said. And you, of all people, should understand that a single rogue pilot trying to dismantle that trust is dangerous. Maya crossed her arms. If by trust you mean corruption and cover-ups, then yeah, I'm dangerous. Carter's expression didn't change. There's an easy way out of this for you. We'll make sure this all disappears. Your name, your career, your reputation, intact. In return, you retract your statements, admit you were misled. Maya scoffed. And if I don't? His smile faded. Then you'll regret it. The call ended. Maya sat in silence, staring at her reflection in the darkened screen. This wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about survival. But she had already made her decision. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Nora Patel. Maya, you need to see this. Another pilot just came forward. And this one has proof they can't ignore. Maya exhaled, feeling the weight lift slightly. The cracks were spreading. She didn't know what would come next. But she knew one thing for sure. The system was finally breaking. The weeks that followed were a battle unlike any Maya had ever faced. Hackers targeted her emails. Private investigators followed her. One night, she found her car's tires slashed, a silent warning that they were far from done with her. But she didn't stop, and neither did the truth. More pilots came forward. More mechanics spoke up. More whistleblowers stepped into the light. The floodgates had opened, and there was no closing them now. Congress launched an official investigation into the FAA, issuing subpoenas to airline executives and regulators alike. Under public scrutiny, David Carter resigned, though Maya knew he hadn't fallen willingly. Skyway's leadership faced criminal charges, and lawsuits piled up against multiple airlines for their negligence. Then came the moment Maya had been both dreading and anticipating, her testimony before Congress. The night before, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the city skyline. Her phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. Zoe, no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you. Maya closed her eyes, the weight of it all pressing down. She had sacrificed so much, her peace, her safety, her sense of security. Was it worth it? She looked at the messages from pilots, flight attendants, passengers, the ones who had trusted her to fight for them. And suddenly, there was no doubt. The next morning, she walked into the hearing room, cameras flashing, the air thick with anticipation. She told the truth. All of it. By the time she stepped out of the chamber, the world had changed. The FAA announced sweeping reforms, banning airlines from influencing safety inspections and creating a new independent oversight body. Airlines that had once dismissed her were now scrambling to rebuild public trust. And Maya? She had won. A year later, she sat in the cockpit of an Atlantic Airways Boeing 787, the sun casting golden light over the horizon as she prepared for takeoff. Captain Maya Daniels. The title had never felt more earned. As she adjusted the controls, her first officer, a young black woman with eager eyes, looked at her with quiet admiration. "I just want to say," the woman said, "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." Maya smiled. "The sky belongs to all of us. Never forget that." As the aircraft surged forward, lifting effortlessly into the air, Maya felt it. The weight of everything she had fought for, now soaring free. No more lies. No more silence. She had changed aviation forever.